Enjoy your time. Good morning. It is morning, right? I have a few new slides. Has anybody seen me before? A couple. Well, those guys in the back, yeah. They live much closer to me. So I've added some slides, so forgive me if things get a little out of whack, because I don't know what slide's behind me without looking down here. So my name's Jim Swearingen. I worked on the very early Star Wars. So we're going to start with, the question that I get a lot is, how did you get into science fiction? August 29 is a date fond to me. That's my birth date. It was the same day that the Russians dropped their first atomic bomb. So I kicked things off because that was the beginning of the atomic age and the race for atomic stuff. So, and other thing is how to get into Star Wars. Well, 1956, I was 7 years old, and I went to see Forbidden Planet. Gave me nightmares for a week. But after that, we played, I don't know if anybody's seen the movie, but then it's the id monster, and you could make the footprint with your fist and the thumb, So we'd be in the sandbox playing Forbidden Planet. So that was my first experience. 1957, the space race started. Sputnik was put in space by the Russians. So again, another touch of science fiction. And in 1958, I was 9 years old. The One-Eyed, One-Horned Purple People Eater was the hit song, and that was me and my bike. We did bike parades where we decorated our bikes and then got judged. So that was my first creative endeavor with an alien. A little further when I was in college, I went to the University of Cincinnati. I saw THX 1138. George Bush. What was that? George Lucas, that was his thesis film. So this is the first brush with George Lucas's name. Loved the film, post-apocalyptic kind of storyline. And shortly after that, I got hired at Kenner Toys. I had worked for a little toy company, Rainbow Crafts. They invented Play-Doh and plates and dip dots and stuff. And they had rolled into Kenner, and I had worked for them as a co-op student. So my boss there said, come and work for Kenner. And a few years later, 1972, they started a preliminary design group, which was a group of designers, engineers, some special model makers, and we were charged with looking at new concepts, new materials. We reviewed Inventor content, like people would bring us ideas, things like Baby Alive and stuff would come through our office. And then we started looking at scripts for TV shows most of the time. But we would read scripts and then we'd come up with ideas how we might do that in a toy. $6 million was the first big licensed product for Kenner Products. The team of designers got together, looked through scripts, saw some video about Steve Austin and the $6 Million Man, and the idea was, what can we do in a toy to translate that into a 12-inch action figure? So we came up with Steve Austin. My contribution was his bionic eye. Everybody had ideas. There was one that we took a tube balloon and for the rolled up skin on his arm, it exposed the bionics. But I gave him his bionic eye. I took a G.I. Joe and carved a big hole in the back of his head and took a hotel peephole and shoved it in there. And that's how the concept got turned over to production. So in preliminary, we would do some preliminary costing. We'd come up with a way of describing the product idea, and then we would turn it over to production design engineer people that would actually do the final development. But they would have at least an idea of what the product was going to be. 1973, here's the second time I ran into George Lucas's name, American Graffiti, really his big push into big Hollywood movies and Academy Awards. So further on, a little bit further, November 1976, the second issue of Starlog magazine It had started in August of '76, and the second issue is in November. And in that, there was a 4-paragraph story about Star Wars. So I was reading this and it says, George Lucas is working at 20th Century Fox on a new movie called Star Wars. So it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. Not long after that, the script for Star Wars came in. And this is the beginning of the story. Some executives from Kenner had seen, had seen some footage of live action. I have to crack this open. So, my boss, Dave Okada, brought the script into the studio and said, does anyone want to look at this Star Wars movie from George Lucas? And I practically leapt at him and said, that's mine. That's mine. So I got to read the script. I took it home that night, came with a book of black and white photographs, like these, from the live action. This was all finished. Excuse me. This live action stuff had been done. They were still working on special effects, and this was somewhere in February, March. But, so I took this home, brought it back to Dave Okada and said, go in your office, close the door, and come back in about 2 hours, and we need to do this. So he took it in his office and read it and said, I think, this is something here, so let's get to work. But the marketing people at the time knew that it had been turned down by every major toy company. Mattel, Ideal, some that are still here, Mego had turned it down after doing Star Trek. But we were convinced, the designers were, that we were going to have something really special here. So we got to work, and this is a really bad rendition, but this is the original sketches that I did in pen and marker that we started presenting to the marketing group and to the management of the company. These are there are 10 characters here. There was the sand person was added later when we started mocking them up. There's a story about Bernie Loomis saying, make them this big. Just so happens that these guys are this big. So when I first used, this is what we used to mock them up. We used Fisher-Price Adventure people. And these are the first characters. The C-3PO there is a drawing that was cut out. But this guy, Luke, and he eventually got one, and Darth Vader, they had our first attempt at a lightsaber. We wanted one that would come out of the hilt. So we took really heavy gauge monofilament, and you'd pull it out, and then there was a reel on the back of his back, so you could crank it back in. Eventually that was, wasn't practical, but these models had it. I've not seen any of these models. There's some people that have reproduced them, but these were my attempts at sculpture, which I never claimed to be a sculptor, but they were done with body putty and a X-Acto knife. So I think Darth Vader started out as a fireman, and Princess Leia was a nurse. And somebody had mocked up a Bigfoot from the $60 Million Man, so that's where that particular Chewbacca came from. But so these are the first things we did. Again, we do a breakdown of costs, we'd send it down. But at this point, we're looking at a presentation we made to 20th Century Fox in March, about the middle of the month. Dave Okada and I went out, presented to Alan Ladd and Mark Pevers and the people at 20th Century Fox to convince them that Kenner, which was kind of a medium-sized toy company, could actually do this project, because they were expecting big things. They didn't know what they were thinking for sure, but they'd been turned down by everybody else, so they were a little desperate. But we were so enthusiastic that they weren't going to pass us up. And these models were used for a lot of stuff. This was, first presentation to buyers just to get them a tease of what we were going to look at. And then this is what production was. So these are those really rough things that I did ended up in production like this. The same process for everything else. First presentation, 20th Century Fox, was roughly this drawing, but we articulated the wings on the rendering so that you could see it actually worked. And the same thing for the TIE Fighter. Then this is did the layout drawings for this, and our model shop built the very first X-Wing. So it had the idea, the proportions were really off because we didn't have any scrap from Star Wars other than a snapshot of an X-Wing. But it had Radio Shack buttons on the back that actuated the sounds. And the younger people in the audience, well, we did all this with paper and pen. We didn't have computers. The most advanced thing about this X-Wing was it had a red LED in the nose. And that was pretty high tech. I did graduate from college with a calculator, so I did have that. But we went to Radio Shack for parts. And that's production. This is long after we gotten, the movie had come out, we've gotten scrap and photographs and stuff, so all the detail could be added in production design. TIE Fighter, first TIE Fighter. Showing the features, we had, and at the time we thought the panels were transparent, not solid, so and pop-off wing. So we defined the product, turned it over to production, and oops, let's go back. So that's production of TIE Fighter. So, a couple of other things that were, that I touched. We wanted to do the do-back, and our figures stood like this. And to ride a horse, you need to at least be able to do this. Well, we weren't going to be able to do that, so I invented the trap door and the do-back. So that was my contribution to that. This is one of the big play sets, the Death Star play set. This is the first model. So I did the layout drawings for this, and then again, our model shop built the thing. The crank on the trash bin is a crank out of a Play-Doh extruder. So we'd use everything we could have to put together, and the turbo cannon was part tank and part something else, just glued together for model kits. And then the model shop built vacuum forms and things to make the elevator and the control panels and all. And this again is production. So it went through the same process over and over again. First lightsaber, the safest lightsaber in the world. We were very conscious of safety, and if you could bruise your brother with it, you couldn't make it. So this is an inflatable tube on the end of a flashlight. And this is the mock-up. We used the flashlight and kind of made it look like a lightsaber. It didn't go over as well as the ones these days. So this is a prototype of the Landspeeder. This is done by a different designer. He's now just passed away. But he did this Landspeeder. Again, at this point, we're getting a little more information from Lucasfilm, because when we first started, they didn't know what we needed. First, remote control. This one had a give a show projector in his chest, so you could see Princess Leia on the wall. He was bigger. Today we might do that, because the price point, we could charge $150 for this. My first trip to Industrial Light and Magic was in California. We think it was April 4th. And this is the building. It's in Van Nuys, California. I'd gone out to glean information from Lucasfilm, and they let us come out and see. I had blueprints. I have some reproductions in my table.
of what we got from Joe Johnston's drawings and sent us photographs. I was there saying, I want that, and I want that. And then they said, you want to go see dailies? And I said, because their offices were on the Universal Studio lot in Burbank, I think it is. They had a bungalow there. I got to drive on. I drove, I was all by myself. Marketing's still thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, I'll go to LA, go to Universal Studios. I got to pull up, and the guy, the security guy comes out with a clipboard, just like in old movies. Oh yeah, I see you here. You can park over there, and their bungalows is the number, whatever it was. So I got to do that. And then they said, you want us to go see dailies. So we hopped in a car and went to Van Nuys. And I got to sit in this room. This is not my photograph, because George Lucas and Gary Kurtz were not there. But you got to sit in these ugly old couches. Somebody's grandmother had donated couches. And I got to sit in the room, and all these people come in, and it's like, I'm going to see the movie. I'm sitting there already. And I'm ready to see the movie, and the lights, they say, okay, run the film, the lights go down. And apparently the film had already started running, and down in the corner, there's like some red and green lights blinking in the corner. It goes on for a little bit. Lights go back up, that's great, everybody leaves the room, and I'm like, what? What was that? But that was some layer of film somewhere. I imagine it's when Obi-Wan is shutting off the tractor beam. So I'm imagining that's what I saw. But I didn't see a TIE fighter or an X-Wing. They were all out in the hallway on stands. So it was a very different thing. And they told me, gosh, you should have been here yesterday. We were blowing up the Death Star. So they were doing that. The day before, they had the model of the Death Star, and it was actually filmed in the parking lot at the Van Nuys studio. And they drive a pickup truck with a camera on the back and blow things up. Or they had a cherry picker, focus down, they'd blow something up towards the cherry picker. So all those exotic scenes that you saw of the Death Star blowing up were done in the parking lot. Now a little further, now they've finished, well, they're still working on special effects between now and May 1st, 1977. They invited someone from Kenner, and I turned out to be the only one. May 1st, they were doing a market research screening of the film to an audience that had been invited. And the audience was invited to see a film called Alaska. And they went to the North Point Theater in San Francisco. And the Uproarious Celesti Entertainment and world premiere of Alaska. So these people, those people, and me, came in to see a movie. They didn't know exactly what it was, because it was, kind of secret stuff. And you sit in a theater that has the first THX 1138 sound system. They had changed the bulbs in the projectors, because they weren't digital yet. The sound system had been tested. The place was clean and is comfortably heated, and we sat down to see what was coming up. And when Star Wars pops on, it's like, people are like, what's this? And then there's crawl, and they start reading, and you can kind of hear, as the crawl's going, there's people that read out loud, but when the shift, you see the shift in the point of view, and the planet appears, and the destroyer comes overhead. When the engines come in, the subwoofers come up, and the whole place you can feel it in your pants. And that's when the air got sucked out of the theater, because everybody's like, and then for the next 2 hours, they're like in this adventure until the Death Star blows up, and people are out of their seats cheering. And I get to say to people, this is the only virgin audience to see Star Wars. They had not, unless they read those 4 paragraphs in Starlog magazine and remembered it when they went to the theater, they had no idea. So to be in that one, it was just amazing. I was like, so they're all filling out their market research forms, And I'm looking for a payphone to go out to the lobby and find a payphone so I can call back to Cincinnati and tell the people, you missed the best movie in the world. This is gonna be incredible. So it's really hard to describe because you have no idea, because after that, the next day I got to go to the Paramount studio and see it a second time with the press. And they're much more jaded, although they were pretty excited. They didn't leap out of their seats yet. But that's when all the PR started. Oh, these are the people that actually did this. Me and a bunch of model makers. I was counting, none of the model makers are still alive. And only one engineer is left. The designers, and one designer is gone. So a good half of this crew is no longer with us. Oh, he's no longer with us either. That was me when I was much skinnier and had more hair. And I got to build an R2-D2. I had a model shop build an R2-D2 for Toy Fair of '78, but that's me with my R2. It didn't move at all, but these are just kind of, I got to go and present a set of the first Star Wars figures to Jerry, that's Jerry Springer. He was mayor of Cincinnati in 1978, and he was making a proclamation. He was proclaiming it Star Wars Day in Cincinnati. A little further on, between the two movies, we have this long stretch, and the marketing department wanted some newness. We needed something. They needed something to get the brand back in focus. So George decided to relent and give us one figure that we could do before the movie. So it was going to be top secret. So we came back to preliminary design, where I was, so that we could keep it, kind of close to our vest, because other areas of the company were more public than we were. So that's George Lucas is on the left. The guy in the middle is Dave Okada, my boss. And of course, that's Boba Fett, the very first costume that George was going to let us see. And I'm on this side. I was taking the pictures and didn't have the presence of mind to say, Dave, would you take a picture of me? But that's my photograph. And I brought those back. And then this is the Kit Bash version of Boba Fett that was made from our parts this time. So we had C-3PO body. The model shop built his armor. I carved his head out of a Darth Vader, and he has stormtrooper arms. And again, body putty came into play in our sculpture. So that's the very first one. I do not know where it is. If I did, it would be up for sale for $1.2 million. But that's the very first one. So these are some other photographs. These I think are more of the archive stuff. But this was used for presentations to people in the industry, and eventually it was used for package photography because they didn't finish the production sculpture. And unfortunately, the rocket firing mechanism was taken out because a child was injured by a Battlestar Galactica spaceship. This is the 12-inch figure. So the other thing that I got to do, we got a first look at The Empire Strikes Back. The product manager at the time was Jim Black. He became the director of licensing. So we got invited to go to England, to Elstree Studio, and I got to tour this set. Again, that's not my photograph. I wasn't allowed to take my camera to this one, but this is the hangar on the Hoth planet. So we got to see the planet. We got to see Yoda for the first time. So we were given a preview of him. This is the puppet version. And then Tauntauns. These are maquettes. These are about this big. They were used for animation. But they had they had practical models that you could actually sit on. I was not invited to sit on one, but that's where we started on. And then this is actually the last product that I actually had my hands on. Again, they used the trap door from the dewback. And then I tell people I took a turn. I had worked on a little bit of strawberry shortcake while I was working on this. I also worked on the Alien. I got to go to the Alien sets and things. I haven't got pictures of him, but on another trip we went to see Alien. I recommended not doing it, but they did it anyway. But I went to the dark side. I was offered a job in the marketing department after a management change in the preliminary design area, and it was the dark pink side. So I took over Strawberry Shortcake in 1980 and was her product manager for 5 years. And at some point in that 5 years, we took Strawberry to a $350 million brand, and we were neck and neck with Barbie that year. So I was pretty excited. And then my toy career has kind of taken. I was at Hasbro for a while. I worked on Gem and the Holograms and Moon Dreamers and some other girls' properties. Came back to Kenner briefly, and then I left and formed a new design development company with some partners. And then a few years ago, the Netflix people came and this fellow that's a Star Wars collector said, I've got this thing for Netflix. Would you be would you be willing to do an interview with me? So this all changed what I did from, I was a retired toy designer, and now I'm a small C celebrity on I get to meet the best people in the world doing all kinds of incredibly crazy things. So I really enjoy hearing the stories. I do feel a little older now because everybody comes up and says, gosh, you made my childhood. And I don't realize that I'm that much older than they are. But I was 27 when I started Star Wars, and it was a great time. I really did all the fun stuff. That trip I tell people that trip when I saw Boba Fett and took the pictures, we're done doing that picture thing, and the guys turning around and taking pictures, and Dave Okada and Gary Kurtz have something to discuss, and they went off, and I'm by myself with George Lucas, and we go back to what's now his home, what was the office in San Anselmo. And we go in the office, and there's Indiana, his dog, and it's like, oh, nice to meet you, Indiana. And we're looking at stuff in his office. We're just talking, me and George Lucas. So I got to sit, it's got this painting on the wall. It's a Frank Frazetta, the Death Dealer, which is a big black Viking thing, big black horse. He's got the painting. I said, I've got that poster on my wall at my office. So we're like just talking about stuff. He had an old Buck Rogers ray gun, tin ray gun on his wall. He had part interest in a comic book company or a comic book store in New York. So we're just talking. It's like, we're just talking about, how exciting it is to work on Star Wars and all that stuff. And the thing I regret most about it is I felt this hour alone with George Lucas, and I never thought to say, you need a toy designer working here at Lucasfilm. I was such a corporate guy, I guess. I just decided, I didn't even come to mind to say, we could make the communications would be better and all that stuff. We could be, it would go so much smoother, all those rough spots never happened. So, but now, if you ever come to Cincinnati, this is the tribute wall to Kenner that's on 9th Street between Race and Vine. And I call it, you know, sometimes I refer to it as my wall, because I worked on 80% of the products that were here. Strawberry and Star Wars and Care Bears, Play-Doh and Give the Show and Spirograph. The only things I didn't do were dinosaurs or Batman and Ghostbusters. But it's a really great mural. It's a huge wall, so if you're ever in Cincinnati, it is a tourist place. And now we're back to ICC. So that's my very brief story. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. You can either come up and I'll try and, I'm supposed to repeat them, but if you have any questions, let me know. We have another 13 minutes. Or you can go back out to those treasure hunts.
Do a lot of the original prototype stuff still exist somewhere?
Yeah, the question is, do a lot of prototypes still exist? There is only one that I know exists. And I know where it is. It's not in my house. Most of the way it worked back in the old days is those models would be turned over to production design, and they would work on it, and then the original stuff would come back and be put in the Kenner morgue and be cataloged and kept in you had a chain link cage and stacks of shelves, and all this stuff would be held there for posterity and, you know, who knows, another museum or something. But as far as I know, none of the stuff that I actually worked on, except the one that I do know, still exists. I've seen reproductions of my stuff, but not the real stuff. Like that, there's a Mark Poon guy in Singapore. He's done, he sells a 3 3/4 inch Boba Fett. Very nice, very clean, much cleaner than mine. But a really nice reproduction, and he's done, you know, rocket firing prototypes and stuff. But most of the stuff that I actually had my hands on were either hidden away where nobody's admitting they have it, and there's only the one piece, and it's out in the open. I've told people it's out in the open, so everybody knows where it is. So that's all I'll tell you. But it's not in my basement. I wish it were in my basement, because I'd keep it. But that's it. That most of that stuff just because we moved. Kenner moved from the Kroger building to another building before it moved to Providence, Rhode Island, or Pawtucket, Rhode Island. So all that stuff got moved, and who knows where it went. Yes.
Is there one that you can remember, one design that you did that just rings on top of your head that you did that got axed that never made it to production that you thought maybe like, why did this one get axed, or you really felt passionate about?
Is there one that got axed that I really wish had gotten done? No, I don't think there really was. I mean, there's so many, and I try, you know, I'm 71 now. Maybe it's there that I just can't, it's like, I can't get it out of there. There were a lot of ideas that got hacked. I mean, I designed a Death Star game. There was a plastic, it had a Death Star, and you took spring-loaded X-Wings and you tried to hit a trigger as it spun around. Never made it. And, but there are lots of those things that we could have made, but none that really stand out and say, why didn't you do that? Yes?
What was your favorite Star Wars toy you made?
My favorite Star Wars, the one that really set me off was the X-Wing. When I read the script and they're talking about the X-Wing and TIE fighter dogfighting, I imagined my childhood days, and that's the way I, as a toy designer, kind of like, how would I play with this? Well, that was pretty obvious. I wanted that dogfight to happen in my bedroom, and the X-Wing. I loved the wings opening up. That was the coolest thing. I could imagine it before I saw it on the screen. You know, it's like this thing opens up and it makes it really cool. So that's my favorite. And the favorite character is C-3PO. Because he's such a weird character. He's got more character than all the other real people in life. Yes, sir.
What advice would you give to, say, a young 20-something who's in college currently, interested in becoming a part of the toy industry someday?
These days you have to have lots of computer skills. 3D is imperative. I couldn't touch one of those guys, you know, anymore, you know, I'm a paper and pen guy. You know, I do a lot of stuff with pencil and paper. I recommend, there's a couple places I recommend. University of Cincinnati is a really good one. If you're interested in animation, the Ringling School in Florida. And there's a couple of colleges, and I'm not real familiar with colleges, but there's a few that have toy design specialties. There's one in New York that does. And UC is, I promote UC because it's a co-op program. When I was at quarters and we did 10 weeks on and 10 weeks in school and 10 weeks off. So I got great experience. I'd look at colleges that do that where you could get some work experience. And get a hold of people at Hasbro and ask them where they're picking. They pick people up from UC, and I'm sure there's some other colleges. I don't know about RISD, but I know they hire from Cincinnati. Yes, sir.
I can only imagine how rewarding it is, you know, to see all the kids that grew up playing with all these toys. Can you say a little bit something about how you feel more recently now that there's another whole generation that are not only into Star Wars but are playing with the toys that you helped design, the actual vintage 40-year-old toys?
I feel incredibly old. It's really rewarding. It's kind of humbling when people do that. And it's great to see. I love going to cons where it's grandfather, son or daughter. You know, it's like 3 generations of a family. My first convention, the first convention that I remember this happening, I went down to the celebration in Orlando, an early one. And I was on a bridge that was over the convention floor, and I'm looking down, and there's a woman that I'm imagining she's maybe my age, would have been 50, 60, you know, she was an older woman. Dressed as Princess Leia in the white, and she's got a little girl about that tall, maybe that tall, dressed as Princess Leia, and they're going down the aisle in the convention floor. And it was just great to see that. Because it really is, it brings some families together like, you know, no other property has. And, you know, boys and girls and moms and dads and stuff. You know, you see, the other picture I have is a couple, an attractive couple walking through a celebration dressed in the slave girl outfit. So I have some great memories of people. And then all the people that come up and ask questions and stuff. So I'm really rewarded by that. And I have a third career as a small C celebrity at places like this. But it's really rewarding to see that people are, you know, interested in talking about it. I'm willing to talk about anything. I am not an expert about anything as far as Star Wars goes. I beyond the first 12, I really didn't have a lot to do with that, because once you do an action figure, you can production design people can do that stuff. But getting the license was the big part, because we were fighting the three things that were wrong with Star Wars. It was a science fiction movie. It's like Star Trek had screwed up science fiction as a licensing vehicle because of Paramount Studio putting weird product out that said Star Trek on it. It was opening in May. We were looking at it in February, March, and it takes a year to get to product. If I had read the script and they said go, we still wouldn't have product until 78. And the idea that a movie would stay that long was just unheard of. It was like, you think you're gonna have product at Christmas? And it's like, well, no, we'll have it after Christmas. But so that's why I've been turned down by so many people. So.
Jim, we have a question from YouTube.
Yes.
Somebody wants to know, why was Grand Moff Tarkin never made?
I don't know, is Tom in the room? Tom Clark. I blame those on marketing. As a designer, I was allowed to do that. Those decisions were made by marketing people. The marketing groups would, I gave them, I have somewhere in my stuff, I have a list of a memo that I wrote of all the characters that we could pick. And he's in there, Graham Marker. I didn't put them in order of importance, but I had a long list of characters that we could do, and ships and all that stuff, and the marketing people. So I get to blame it on marketing. The other question I asked often is, why does Luke have yellow hair one time? He's got orange hair or brown hair. Those are all mistakes made in the Orient. And at the time, especially Luke Farm Boy, we needed product on the shelf, and you get we've got 500,000 yellow or orange-haired Lukes. Do you want to not ship them because of the hair, or do you want to ship them in case somebody, the obvious decision at that point was get it out the door, get it to Toys R Us or KB Toys or whatever it was going to be. Get it out the door. We need the volume. So, anything else?
Did you have any involvement in the transition when Hasbro bought Kenner and transferred the line?
I was employed by Hasbro. Well, I left Hasbro in 1991. I think 1990. I was there from 85 to 90. Came back to Kenner. Hasbro purchased Kenner. In 92, I left. So I wasn't part of it was a very different, the reason the contracts got renegotiated was because of a communication problem between Kenner Legal and Hasbro Legal and people not reading the small print. So but beyond that, the only person that was all the way through that was Mark Boudreau, the guy that did all the Millennium Falcons and other stuff. So, yes.
It's probably a common question for you, but why does the Luke Farmboy have a yellow lightsaber?
Why does Luke have a yellow lightsaber? Good question. Again, if you're in A New Hope, Luke did not have his own lightsaber. He actually only handled. Did he handle his dad's?
Yeah, Anakin.
Okay, Anakin. So, in theory, it would have been red. But at the time, he didn't have his own lightsaber. And we already had a red lightsaber in Darth, and we had a blue lightsaber in Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we didn't want to do the same color. So they said, well, what color are we going to do it? And they did yellow. So that's how it happens.
Jim, we have one more question from YouTube, then we are going to be out of time. Okay, Jorge asks, pardon me, I gotta read it off of the script. The product designers who built Apple's first computer for the public signed the inside of the computer case. This little secret was something that we didn't learn until about much later. Did Kenner and their design team do anything like this? This gentleman heard that someone had signed their kid's name on a playset.
Oh, if they did, they're in trouble. No, I don't know. I don't know that anyone did any of that. I mean, I didn't. I was way too straight, it's straight arrow. It's like I didn't take anything home. I didn't tell any secrets. I forgot to say George Lucas should hire me. So that was about it. So, thanks for sitting in.